said, I did write it a couple years ago, so don't mind mistakes, you know. But anyway, I was going to say, we studied when Doug was reading that Declaration of Independence, we studied the men's lives that signed it, and each of them said, you know, I know that I will probably be hung or whatever may happen, I'm willing to sign. And each of them went up and said, hang me first. You know, each of them was willing to sign their names no matter what happened to their lives. And one man, he had cancer on his face. It was very bad cancer. He had to keep traveling to Britain back for cancer treatments. He knew one night, right before they signed, they had to get together, and they said, you need to come tonight. So he had to ride all night in a bad thunderstorm. And he said, I mean, he was so tired and everything, but he was willing to do it for freedom. But when it came time to sign, he knew his cancer treatments would end. He couldn't go to Britain anymore. He would die a painful death. He knew it. And he says, you know what? My posterity, this will be a gift for my posterity. And he signed. And each of them men, a lot of them, his wives were put in prison. A lot of them went to prison. A lot of them were, their wives, you know, their families were beaten. Their homes were burned. Many of them suffered, but they knew, and they still were willing, and even till the day most of them died, every one of them died, they said, I know this was worth it. And I'm thankful for all the sacrifices that have been made for us to have freedom. And so this little paper's on, it's called The Land of Promise. America has been a land of promise. It has been a choice land, and in the eternal design of God, whosoever has had possession of this land, so long as they did believe in him, have had the blessing of being free. The inhabitants of this land, while under Britain's rule, had a firm belief in freedom. They understood its basic principles and were willing to lay down their very lives for liberty. The story of the American Revolution is that of a people struggling to grasp hold and secure their God-given rights. It is the story of a country that breaks free from tyranny and then overcomes near anarchy. It is the story of a nation led by the hand of God. While America was under the rule of Great Britain, the people faced constant oppression. British soldiers were perpetually raiding the cities and disrupting the lives of the citizens. Several acts were passed by the British Parliament to place a tax on nearly all imported goods. The people sent many pleas to Parliament to release the burden of so many taxes, and yet their cry was heard among deaf ears. The people desired freedoms the British Parliament were unable to understand. As the taxes grew worse, cries for freedom echoed across the continent, and soon the fire of built-up resentment broke into flame. People refused to buy the taxed items, and actions like the Boston Tea Party, where pounds of tea were thrown into the sea by angry citizens, appeared widespread. The voice of freedom was heard among the people, and soon a Continental Congress was formed. The destiny of the nation turned as war broke out between America and Britain, and the quiet whisperings of independence unleashed a full-out declaration. America no longer desired to be placed in bondage by the oppressions of being subject to Great Britain. As war between America and Britain raged on, it seemed that the staggering army of the states was in constant need of more men and more supplies. There was never a winter that went by without men who were stricken with cold and unquenchable fatigue. In the midst of war and bloodshed, it seemed that the cause to keep on fighting had been lost. When the men faced the hardship and turmoil of the battlefront, many lost hope and wondered if what they were doing was truly worth the sacrifice they were making. One winter was extremely harsh. The men were stationed at a place known as Valley Forge. Many were without blankets, and most without shoes, their blood staining the snow-covered hillside. It was a sight that would cause even the hardest of hearts to break and mourn over such tragedy. An ever-present hunger penetrated throughout the camp. It was a hunger for food, a hunger for warmth, a hunger for peace, and a hunger for home. It seemed in the midst of such suffering, whenever there has been a noble cause and an invaluable need for victory, there have been great leaders, men of wisdom and virtue placed on this earth to encourage and inspire those they led. One of these great leaders, the general of the American troops, was George Washington. His courage in the face of battle, wisdom in the direction and movement of the troops, his ever-present humility and unwavering faith in God's deliverance influenced the spirit and destiny of the nation. On one occasion, a few years after the war began, the British had imported nearly 20,000 trained soldiers to the fronts of New York. There, George Washington and his small recruit of an army were stationed. Within days, they were surrounded. and it seemed the destiny of the American troops was nothing but utter destruction. Unable to retreat, unable to advance, the army held their position. Every moment was filled with fear of the hour when their enemies would be upon them. Although it seemed that all would be lost, George Washington did not lose hope. A plan for retreat was intact, yet he knew that its success relied on the protection and guidance of heaven. That night, the American army quietly slipped out of the grasp of their enemies with a growing thickness of heaven-sent fog, filling in around them and placing a cover over the eyes of those who would destroy them. The prayer of a general was answered, and the American troops escaped without harm. With so many retreats and losses, the American people began to wonder if there would ever be a moment where they would greatly defeat their enemies. That winter, in the eyes of the general, such a moment for triumph had come. It was a New Year's Eve, and the winter wind bit shrewdly at any who stood unprotected from its fierce blows. The British had hold of a fort that would prove to be of great advantage to America. As night approached, George Washington saw a chance for victory. Rallying the troops, they set out for a long march over snow-covered terrain. Could such an army possibly win a battle as great as this? Victory was in the hands of God, and because of the faith of this small band of men, victory it was. In the morning, the unsuspecting British awoke to find themselves surrounded by the gunfire of the American troops. That New Year's Day, a battle was won, and courage was restored to the despairing colonists. Through God's deliverance from the hands of their enemies, and through his guiding presence in providing the means of triumph, the people were reminded of the reason they were fighting. They were fighting for liberty. They were fighting for their wives, their children, their peace, their religion, their freedom. With the inspired leadership of George Washington, hopelessness was turned to faith, faith to courage, and courage to victory. Throughout the war, it may have seemed that the odds were on the side of the British. With thousands of professional troops, a large navy, an abundance of guns, ammunition, and pride, the ragtag army of American soldiers could have barely stood a chance against such an advanced and superior army, though it seemed that God had a plan for America. There was a source of victory the British were unable to grasp, even if they could have looked into the hearts and minds of the farmers and the shopkeepers, which made up the opposing army. For in them there was more to what they were doing than mere pay in the end. There was the understanding of freedom and the reliance on the protection of a divine intervention. Although the British may have thought themselves superior, it seems in the midst of war and bloodshed one can find no greater power on earth than that of a humble general upon his knees, pleading with the Lord for the blessings of heaven on behalf of his beloved country, and that of his men, willing to follow in the name of liberty. Such as this gives a nation hope, and through the tender mercies of God, a small army fighting for a weak confederation of states was able to defeat a great and powerful nation. And I know that we won through God's hand, through no act of our own, that we won through our Father helping us, because the gospel needed to be restored, and we needed a free nation to do it. And I know that all the men that were brought together to form the Constitution of the United States all brought knowledge and faith and everything that was needed to form our Constitution so that the gospel could be restored. And I'm so thankful for what freedom we have left, and pray that we can fight for that, and always get on our knees and thank our Father for all that these men have done for us, and for the freedom that we do have. And these things I say in Jesus Christ.
We'll sing My Country 'Tis of Thee.
What page? Oh, so you're
339 in this new book.
Okay. I got a scripture that goes with it, she says.
Yeah, let's have a scripture. Yeah.
If you got, who's some scriptures?
Grandma.
Doctrine and Covenants.
Pass.
You mean you don't have to memorize?
One you did.
Oh, I thought you had the whole Bible book.
And the songs.
And the songs. Articles of Faith, let's see. Joseph Smith's first mission in the church history.
Yeah.
Mormon doctrine.
Yeah. Articles of Faith. Yeah. Talmud.
Hey, this is in section 101.
Like, limit amount.
There's other scriptures that relate a lot to this too, but this is just one of the many. This, in section 101, there's a part here where it goes through and lists a lot of the great blessings and things that will happen during the millennium. And then after it lists all those things, it says this: "And all they who suffer persecution for my name and endure faith, though they are called to lay down their lives for my sake, yet shall they partake of all this glory. Wherefore fear not, even unto death. For in this world your joy is not full, but in me your joy is full. Therefore care not for the body, neither the life of the body, but care for the soul, and for the life of the soul. And seek the face of the Lord always, that in patience ye may possess your souls, and ye shall have eternal life."
That was perfect. That was perfect.
And then the exclamation.
Yeah, I that was beautiful.
Mother, would you give us a closing prayer?
Wait.
Wait.